Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, is Trey Young underrated?
And no need to panic yet, Braves country, but with so many injuries to the pitching staff for the Braves, should Alex Anthopoulos maybe reset?
And last but not least, and for the culture, where was I over the last week or so? We'll talk about it all coming up next, right here on ATL Day Ones. Let's go.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Want to start by saying thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate that from you in advance. Today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we're going to talk about the Atlanta Braves. What does that second half look like? Are you concerned about the bullpen? But first, we have to talk about Trae Young. He has been talking a lot lately. We obviously got the From the Point podcast that he's been doing as well, but he got a chance to sit down with Draymond Green, And I think this was one of the things that I thought was very interesting, right? When Draymond was talking to Trae about, being the villain and possibly embracing that role of being the villain. But Trae kind of pushed back and said, you know what? I don't really care to be in that role. And I really think that when you think about what Trae is and how he it seems like it fits him well. Do you think he needs to start maybe embracing it? Because at the end of the day, people are going to feel how they feel about you when it comes to this whole NBA perspective, right?
Yeah, I would agree. And it's interesting because before I heard that interview with Draymond Green, I honestly thought that Trae embraced the role of villain, because when he goes into Madison Square Garden and you're bowing in the middle of Madison Square Garden, it seems to me like you're embracing that, right? That you're okay with it. So I don't know. I'm a little conflicted, but then again, that was last season and this is the off season. So maybe this is an opportunity for him to truly reflect. And as he matures, realizes that, hey, that's not the complete narrative that I want out there for me. So how do you begin to change the narrative? Well, one of the two narratives that's out there, Coach Killer being the other one. But at least with that particular narrative, this is an opportunity for him to once, twice, or maybe thrice, if there's another podcast episode coming out there from some other entity, then maybe this is an opportunity for him to reset and reshift the thought process on that particular narrative about him.
Yeah, and I think and you do that by, performing, right? Like that's how you kind of change it, right? Is because at the end of the day, if you're performing well and people are, chanting your name or saying blank Trey Young or saying overrated and all that stuff, I think that, there's an easy way to kind of make those things either go away or they make them stronger. And you do that by playing well. And I think that Trey can do that, as a up-and-coming player in the NBA because I think the most important thing is what he wants to try to change the perspective is, and that's that whole coach killer piece. That's what he needs to focus on. Forget the villain. I don't think that's necessarily the thing that he needs to be focused in on. I think the whole thing he needs to do is make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to do by outwardly, and I think he's starting to do that, right? Because I think that it was huge for him to come out and publicly endorse Quinn Snyder and what he was doing as far as all of the changes that were made in those 20-some-odd games. So I think that if he starts to focus on that, I think that people will understand the type of player he is, because a lot of times it takes up, especially when we talk about coach killer and and villain and all that stuff. It's kind of hard to get past that if people are wondering whether or not you're a good person or not. And that's the kind of thing that I feel like Trae is at least starting the process to try to change that narrative.
Well, I think it's also going to be hard to change that narrative instantly. I think villain is probably the easier narrative to change in the short term. You are now 4 coaches in technically. So with you now being 4 coaches in, and you started off believing the praises that were given about Lloyd Pierce, I believe they came from both Dwayne Wade and Steph Curry.
Yeah.
So it seemed that you were okay and co-signing on what they said. And then when Nate started and Nate became the full-time coach, I can recall some very positive comments that you gave, some very positive feedback that you gave relative to his experience in the league and all that he saw being a part of the backcourt for the Sonics. So you kind of have already had the opportunity to set a narrative in a positive way at the beginning of a tenure, only for it to go elsewhere. So I think it's probably going to be a couple of seasons where people, unfortunately, right or wrong, they're going to want to wait and see what happens once Quinn Snyder is through 2 full seasons, because look at Lloyd. I think Lloyd got through 2.5. Nate got through 2.5. Since Quinn has already been there for 25 games, technically 2 seasons will put him right at 2.5. I think that's what people are going to be looking to see. What does it look like going into, Quinn Snyder's second full season, and whether or not, A, he's on the hot seat, and B, if he is, who and how did he get there?
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing that, you know, he gonna have to really focus in on the whole ball piece. And when you think about, you know, the whole that aspect of it, it kind of brings me to, you know, when you talk about Michael Porter Jr., a guy that he came up with in the whole AAU circuit, and those guys played together. Those guys are very familiar with each other, and he was talking about how, you know, Trae, you know, was a little bit underrated, you know, and I think that given the things that we just talked about, those are some of the things I think he needs to handle. And that, like you said, that is going to take time. He cannot sit up here and try to change people's perception of him, because at the end of the day, some people, when it comes to the NBA, just like we talking about that conversation that I'm not going to have with Michael Jordan and LeBron, people are going to go LeBron until they go to the grave, and there's nothing you can do to change their mind. So there are some people, New York Knicks fans, they aren't going to change. They're going to stay that same way. They're going to remember you bowing in the Madison Square Garden and giving them a kiss goodbye and doing the whole ice tray and all that stuff. They're never going to forget that. So you're going to forever be a villain in their eyes. So some things that you don't need to worry about changing, but there are some things that you need to focus in on and say, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to be labeled a coach killer, so I need to make this Quinn Snyder thing work ASAP. And when you think about also, just real quick, T, I think one of the things about this Pascal Siakam, because I know you and
Jamie did talk about it. Yeah.
Jamie, I know you and Jamie talked about it for a little bit and kind of talk about that thing. I think that's another thing that can kind of change the narrative as well, in him kind of via social media, kind of reaching out and all that stuff. Like, do you think that that's something that can kind of help that aspect of as well, like being able to recruit guys and bring them in? Am I stretching a little bit?
I think you are, and I'm just going to be honest. And here's why I think it's a stretch.
Okay.
Until you see it actually come to fruition in a positive way with Dejounte Murray, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not going to be anything that helps him to evolve or change the narrative right now, or at least before DJ signed his extension. There were whispers around the association saying, see, we told you, not a good place to go. And so Atlanta was slowly going right back to the norm, where people and players were saying, nah, that's not a place that we want to play. But with DJ doing the extension, I think that might go a longer way than anything that Trae can actually say, because DJ is so well respected and appreciated in the league that I think a lot of players are saying, okay, if DJ decided to stay, if Quinn Snyder is there, and then we can actually see some of the workings from, I'll say, even the first half of the season, and I'm saying that for a reason. If we can actually see some things in a positive space that is a result of that, right? Then when you come down to it, because I still think the trade deadline might actually be the space where you'll see things kind of move in the positive for the Hawks. It may not happen right now. It may actually be to the trade deadline. But if players see DJ and Trae working effectively together, that might switch that narrative back. And I think the other piece there is this. Steve Koonin said on Dukes and Bell on Friday that it's not for lack of the Hawks making calls and the lack of calls being made. It's just that every time something seems to break down. So I think that's the other piece. As long as you know that the Hawks are still out there trying to work deals, I think that piece may even speak more than what Trae says because it says that the front office is still looking to make this team better. So maybe as a player, you're thinking, okay, I could be a part of that, or let me see what it is that they're working on and I might consider it.
I have to let you know that this episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is the #1 sportsbook in America. People, guess what? You can go to FanDuel today and take your first swing and bet on MLB and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, $20, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. I'm telling you. You can bet on from the money lines to the over-unders. You can even bet how many home runs, who's going to hit the first home run. Guess what? The Braves, I know the streak just ended, 28 games. Oh, my God, what are we going to do? You can come back right now and bet on who can hit the first home run. So all you got to do, guys, you don't have to worry about everything because FanDuel's got you covered. The app is safe, secure, and it's super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get your money right then and there. So you don't have to worry about texting folks and them not responding and ghosting you and all that good stuff. As soon as that thing clears, the money is going right into your account. So, yeah, make sure you go there. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
So Sunday over at Truist Park saw the end of so many streaks. Of course, no more series wins in a row. There would have been 12, but unfortunately, the White Sox spoiled that on Sunday with an 8-1 win over the Braves. Also, the Braves had a franchise record 28 games in a row where they hit a home run. No home run on Sunday as well. That one RBI came from a Matt Olson single, if you will, that one run on the board. And of course, another streak was 7-0 this season when the Braves had an opportunity in 3-game series to close out in that third game. They took an L, but I don't think that's a reason to panic, Jarvis, because I think we still saw a lot in the series that was still positive and that was still consistent with what you saw pre-All-Star. But the one thing that maybe kind of concerned me was that we might be back in that space of, okay, we're getting there because Max Fried had a nice rehab assignment, scoreless rehab assignment on Saturday, but then Colby Allard goes down with arm tightness. And so it just makes you think. And of course, we know that they're being really cautious with AJ Minter kind of day to day. And so I looked at that and I'm thinking, okay, they're not in super duper trouble, right? It's not to a point where we should panic because they're still everywhere that they need to be in first place. ERA, WHIP, F-WAR, which I said, okay, what the heck is F-WAR? I'm learning something new every day. Great. Baseball terminology switches up on you, right? But the F-WAR, as it relates to pitching, is offensive, defensive, base running contributions, all of those things that they kind of roll into one. And then, of course, field independent pitching, which means, hey, if you're out there helping with the infield to mitigate home runs to the extent that you can, getting strikeouts, getting walks, and avoiding hit by pitches. The Braves do all of it, and they do it at the highest level. They are still, 8? I think I checked 8.5 games ahead of the Marlins. They are still about 8 games ahead of the Dodgers in the National League, thanks to them losing in extras to the Mets. Still in a good place and in good standing. But do you feel like maybe some of these injuries are maybe making Alex Anthopoulos think, as he gets closer to the trade deadline, that maybe there needs to be some additions, whether it's to the bullpen or the starting staff?
I think there needs to be, to answer your question, I think there needs to be some additions made to this squad, right? But not because they have to. I don't think they have to. I feel like they are in a space where you don't want to get to a space where you have to, and you don't have the and the NBA trade deadline. Excuse me, the Major League Baseball, the trade deadline has passed. So I think, and we know that Alex Anthopoulos has been tremendous when it comes to having the foresight to, look ahead and look down the road because what if Michael Soroka doesn't work out in the bullpen? What if he continues to struggle? So I need to go out, maybe make start having the conversation with the San Diego Padres and say, hey, Josh Hader, what would it take? Y'all struggling, y'all stink. Let's see if we can make something happen. So I think that the Braves do need to make those phone calls, and just from a standpoint of, because what the goal is this year. You are the best team in baseball. 30 games over 500. And I was looking at some of the, how they do the percentages of teams making the playoffs, and the Braves are at 100% right now. So, and like you said, you have like an 8.5, 9-game lead over the Marlins, and the Phillies are surging, but, I'm not concerned about them at this moment. Mm-hmm. So I think right now, Alex Anthopoulos does need to pick up the phone. He does need to say, you know what, let me start having some conversations now, because I don't want to be in a space where I need a bullpen arm, or I need a starting pitcher, because Max Fried came back and he still doesn't look the same, or Kyle Wright gets pushed back some more. You know what I'm saying? So all those things I think kind of factor into Alex Anthopoulos saying, you know what, I am going to go do this right now because, hey, I need to have the foresight, because the goal right now is to win a World Series.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point about the fact that when you look at some of the stats, or the odds, if you will, they say that the Braves are still at 100% for making the World Series. And part of that is probably because, listen, if we're being honest, they're not the only team in the league that is having some challenges with their pitching rotation as it relates to injuries. That's actually very common. I saw a stat that said that the average, I think the highest year of injuries was like 489 when you look at a starting pitching staff across Major League Baseball. If the trend stays where it is as of today, by the end of the regular season, there will have been 549 injuries to pitchers in the starting rotation across Major League Baseball. So this is an issue. Yeah, this is an issue that is something that not only the Braves are looking at, but other teams as well. But I kind of like going back to a space where no pun intended, it worked for you already this season, and B, they're probably still doing some wholesale getting rid of players, if you will. And that, of course, would be the Oakland A's. So it worked. It has worked to perfection getting Sean Murphy, right? Yeah. So what if you can go back to the table and get maybe a Paul Blackburn? Now, don't get me wrong. Got a high ERA, if you will, but there are some other things that you can look at as well in terms of, remember, we were just talking about that FIP, where that number is much lower, right? And so that kind of helps him with his overall ERA. It's one of those baseball terms, xERA, where they're adding in all these other stats that we're not going to bore our audience with the details. But another important piece there is, for him, he would be cheap, right? Mm-hmm. And he'd be someone who would be under the control of the Braves for a couple of years, as opposed to maybe like a rent-a player, like maybe a Jock Peterson from a couple seasons ago. So I was thinking about that, like, who could they get that maybe could give them more than just this season? And maybe if they are going on a run, if you will, that's a World Series type run that goes above and beyond just this season, maybe they can look at a guy like that, or maybe they can look at a guy like, okay, and this of course would be like those outliers where like a Marcus Stroman, okay, or a Jordan Montgomery. Now it's going to take you a whole heck of a lot. The only reason I throw them out there is because we know with Alex Anthopoulos, he's the kind of guy who can make magic out of absolutely nothing, where you say, wow, how did he pull that off? And it could come to fruition. So I like where you went with yours. And I think there are still some options and opportunities out there with what Alex Anthopoulos can do. Now, the other piece there is not that you've seen injuries per se at different positions, particularly in the infield. Otherwise, your whole infield wouldn't have played in the All-Star game. But there are some maybe opportunities for each player at each position within the infield to maybe do a little bit of an uptick that'll help the Braves, dare I say it, improve even more. So I thought this would be kind of cool to kind of look at the infield and ask you, Jarvis. And I kind of started this conversation a little bit with Jamie, but we only went into one player. So I'd love to go into the rest with you, looking across the infield, whether it's one player or all the players in the infield. Who would you like to see have an uptick in this second half? And what would that uptick be that you feel would be, I don't want to say necessary, but maybe important for the Braves to continue to have a stronghold on the league like they have?
I'll probably be Austin Riley because when you think about like I think he's at like 40 some RBIs right now. I have to double check that, but and I would think like they're kind of on pace to be like 90. I want to get them to maybe like that 110, 115, 120 RBI range because those are some of the numbers that kind of bring back memories for me. Because when you think about guys, 30 home runs, 120 RBIs, or 40 home runs or 130 RBIs. So those are some of the numbers that I feel like a guy like Austin Riley should be, coming close to, if not exceeding on a year in, year out basis, because we know he's capable of those things, right? Because once he gets hot, I think that's something that you got to definitely keep an eye on. And I think Austin Riley is a guy that, he can get up to that 100, 115, 120 RBI. So I think those kind of my expectations for him. Mm-hmm. I want Matt Olson to lead the league. I know he's leading National League right now in RBIs. So I want him to continue to work and do his thing in that cleanup spot and make sure that he becomes the leader in RBIs because a lot of people had looked at Matt Olson a little sideways, which is kind of warranted when he was brought in with Freddie Freeman, then immediately got the contract, and people were kind of upset about that. But he's proven that, hey, I'm worth that money. I'm worth it, and I'm really good as first baseman. He has a little slip up on defensively from time to time, but like this guy can actually go out there and play, and I think Anthopoulos made the right decision by doing what he did. When you take it all into perspective, looking back on it right now. So those are some of the guys that I feel like if they need to continue just to bring it up a little bit, go ahead and step your little game up a little bit, and get your name in conversations with some of the best around the Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I would agree. And going back to Austin Riley, when you look at his numbers, his best year as far as RBI, because that's one of the things that you mentioned, was 2021, where he did get over the 100 mark, 107 to be exact, a little bit of a downtick in 2022 with 93, but still nothing to sneeze at, right?
Right.
Exactly. Then you get to this year and he's at right about 45. So you kind of want to see him get maybe to 65 on this side of the break, if you will, the All-Star break, in order to, because what that means is we don't see what we saw yesterday, where we saw runner after runner in scoring position, or even what we saw in game 2 on Saturday, where the Braves with Ronald Acuna Jr. solo shot and Ozzie Albies getting on base, they gave the Braves an opportunity, but the Braves just couldn't get it done.
Take advantage.
Exactly. Austin Riley, Matt Olson, they just couldn't get it done. So I think that you make a very important point. If we can get the RBI number up for Austin Riley, that would mean that he was driving some runs in. And I think that's a positive thing. And also I would say, in addition with Matt Olson, because like you said, it's probably more on the defensive side for him than anything. I think that with what we're looking at, I would say with Ozzie Albies, it's interesting because he's got his 22 home runs, 12th in the majors. He's got 66 RBI. So he's doing, quite fine there. But the average is interesting because it's only, and I say only, but it's only 266. So I think I'd like to see that average go up a little bit more because, again, that tells me that he's not just hitting home runs, but he's getting on base and he's stretching, right? Yeah. And so I look at he had a triple a couple games ago, and I was like, that's kind of what you want to see, him stretch a single to a double or a double to a triple. So like you said, just an uptick of each and every player in the infield, and I think that the Braves will not just be better, but continue to be the best. So, but what do you guys think? What do our everydayers think? Do you guys think there's anybody? We'll start with the infield. We'll go to the outfield tomorrow, guys, but we'll start with the infield. Is there anyone in the Braves infield besides what we said about Austin Riley, or besides what we said about Olson or even Albies? Is there anything else that you guys want to see from Orlando Arce? We know that, that's an opportunity for the Braves as well, potentially in the second half, all things considered. Hopefully no serious injuries come back that way. But ultimately speaking, what do you guys think they need to do? Tell us on YouTube by dropping a comment in the chat. Jarvis is back, and he's much better, I admit, than me. Checking the comments. So if you actually put a comment in there, he will actually respond, and we might even talk about it on the show. And of course, make sure that you download ATL Day Ones wherever you download your podcasts.
But this is For the Culture. It is the intersection between sports, entertainment, the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about, because that's just how we get down on the show. Today is no different. Now you know that I took a couple of days off. I had planned this trip about a month and a half in advance with my wife, and we were planning to go out to go see her grandmother, who is 94 years old. But unfortunately, we found out last week that she had passed away, and it was obviously sad. But when we started to think about it and kind of process that thing, we really got to a space where we were just like, okay, she lived a good life. She was the matriarch of the family, and she was such an amazingly wise woman. Like every time I had conversations with her, I started to kind of think about, some of those things as we were out there with the family and visiting with everyone. It was just a really cool experience just to be surrounded by people that you love. And obviously I say Tanae, my wife's grandmother, but, I feel like she was my grandmother too. So I embraced that, you know what I'm saying? Because she embraced me as a grandson, because just the conversation that we used to have over the years. So yeah, it was definitely a celebration as we went out there and kind of and had good time with family.
Indeed. Yeah, I love to hear that, because it is a sad occasion, and of course our condolences and thoughts and prayers to your family, but ultimately it is a blessing that you had an opportunity to be out there, just kind of laugh, smile, and just think about all the positive times that you had with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And but me, T, obviously, I go through my emotions and everything, and how I process things, I try to find laughter, So, during the service, there was a mixed crowd, so to speak, at this particular church. This is my wife's uncle's church, So they got the Rainbow Coalition going on in there, you know what I mean? So, and there was a certain soprano. For those you don't know, those are most of the time they're women. They sing the high pitch on when you talking about harmony. They on the top end of things, and she seemed like she was a little confused, to start the song, and they had a nice look, because Tanae's grandmother, she loved music, so they went to a bevy of songs. I think like 6 songs. In this particular song, she seemed like she was struggling a little bit. Her eyes all wide open. She was like, "Oh my God," I'm saying, and everything like that. But she seemed like she kind of settled in. T. She started off a little rough, but she settled in. And then at the end, this is where I kind of lost it, because Tanae kind of looked to me and she was just like, "Oh, she did that one for the ancestors." Because at the end of the song, she was like, "Woo." I said, "Oh my God." Like,
Right. But what do you do? Do you clap? Do you say amen? Do you just kind of like what do you do?
Like, I didn't know where to go with it, because it's just like I couldn't do nothing but laugh, because I'm sitting here looking, obviously, it started out a little rough. But she seemed like she was very proud of herself once she got to the end of the song.
Because in her mind, beautiful, beautiful melodies were being sent up to heaven.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, lady.
Yes. But yeah, shout out to our European sister over there. She was holding it down in the choir, harmonizing and all that stuff. And this started off with
bless her heart.
Bless her. Yes. Right there. We're going to end it right there. Bless her heart. One really cool, another cool story to you. I thought it was very interesting when you sent it over to me. Kazuyoshi Miura is the world's oldest pro footballer. Dude is 56 years old. He just signed with a team for an undisclosed amount of time. Like, I think that's kind of a little weird, why y'all trying to keep that a secret. But he's not only just doing this right now, T. The man says he's trying to play this 60. Is this the Tom Brady of soccer?
I think so.
Oh,
or he might be, and oh my goodness, I know his last name is Hull. I want to say Brett Hull. I think is the NHL player that went across like maybe 5 decades. So that's what I was feeling more like. Okay, we're trying to pull our best impression of Brett Hull. But you know what? Then I said I can't be mad at him, because when you love what it is that you do, and then there's an opportunity to do something on a greater level that no one else has done, I cannot be mad at him for trying. Wow, that's amazing. And for him to say, hey, I can be at least, I don't want to say great, but at least solid across that much time. The fact that you could even get on the soccer field and do your thing is impressive.
Yeah, 56 years old. You right here still playing professionally. Like, come on. Like, that got to be, I'm probably 100% surety that is part of his pickup line. Like, yeah, I'm out here still getting this money. All right, guys, we're going to end it right there.
Yes.
We're going to thank you guys for.
Because I have thoughts, but I refuse to share them.
I know you do.
Have a good
Save
day
for tomorrow.
there.
For those thoughts, make sure you guys come back for those thoughts. We're going to get to those thoughts in For the Culture tomorrow. Yes. And we also want to say thank you, just like Tenitra said, for everydayers for coming and rocking with us each and every day, Monday through Friday. We really appreciate you guys. It's good to be back in the saddle. It's good to be back with my squad, with my teammate, T. We're going down. We're going to be back tomorrow. Yeah, well, I ain't going nowhere. I'm back. We're back, baby. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back on Tuesday. So make sure you guys check us out. And we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And before we get out of, make sure if you guys don't do anything else for the rest of your lives, if you don't do anything else for the rest of your life, make sure that you go share love, show love, and most importantly, spread love.